we've had some unusual challenges over the last few years. Someone indicated to me some time ago that I really selected the wrong time to be county executive. And probably if you look at it politically, it is probably the wrong time to be county executive. But if you look at it in terms of programs, services, and moving this county along, this is probably the most important time to be county executive. And what I mean by that is that when you have fewer dollars, you have challenges at all levels, you can't afford to make a lot of mistakes. When you have plenty of money, you have more flexibility. And literally, you can paper over a number of mistakes. But absent that, you have to get it right, and you have to get it right almost every time the first time. And that's a real challenge. And I'm going to just show you, just to give you a magnitude of the challenges and problems that we face. When I assumed this office, we had a deficit before the onset of the recession. And we've had to close budgetary gaps over the last few years of $2.6 billion. That's billion with a B. $2.6 billion in budgetary gaps. I want you to look at this. 1 year long is $975 million. That's approaching $1 billion in 1 year. So when you see the number that Jennifer just placed on the chart of $135 million gap, I thought I would never get to a point and say, boy, we have made significant improvement and almost welcome the day of 135 million compared to 975. That's what we're looking at. 975 in 1 year. That's 2.6 billion over about a 5-year period. That's a huge amount. That's a staggering amount. Let me also show you the difference in what we've been able to do in terms of how that looks and why this sudden shift was so important. Look at the preceding years before. The year actually before I assumed office, the last year, 14.1% in 1 year. In the previous 4 years, it was 42% growth in a 4-year period. And so we built these expectations of services, programs, for which we readily have become accustomed to. And so part of my task was to try to tamper that to make budgets much more sustainable. So going down to a 5.7 from a 14.1%, believe it or not, was a drastic change. And then look at it after the years there, to go all the way down to 1.2, and then several years it was a minus. So if you take the first 4 years, the preceding 4 years of 42%, and then take the following 4 years, you have 42% compared in 4 years to a 0% of tax-supported budget for the following 4 years. Now, how do we get there? It was very, very painful. One of the most difficult decisions I had to make was to eliminate positions. Now, 1,253 or 54 positions eliminated. Now, at the first round of the eliminations, you are in fact looking, for example, at positions, and you can absorb that by way of retirements and movements within departments. But after the first or second round of that, you're not simply talking positions, you're talking bodies. You're talking librarians. You're talking all kinds of people who are impacted by that each and every day. And when you lose a job in this economy, it means that someone's mortgage is in jeopardy, their car payment, the kids who are in school. And so for me, that was very painful. And so I tried to, in fact, not to do that. You may recall on one of the occasions, I had a huge fight with some of our unions. And I'm a very strong pro-union person, but I said at one point, in reference to a labor negotiated agreement, that we couldn't fund it, that I wouldn't fund it. I even took the step to say that I didn't think that I was even subject to the law. That said that based on the law that we had an arbitrated collective bargaining agreement that by county law said that the county executive must fund this. I said, well, I don't think the law is constitutional. It's inconsistent with the charter. So I took the position that if I had to do that, I would have to eliminate another 600 positions, provide at least another $30 million in cuts, or significantly increase your taxes again. And so we've taken not just reductions in services, but we've taken a balanced approach, something different from what they've tried to do down in Congress. Because you may recall, we increased, for example, property tax slightly in 1 year. We increased the fuel energy tax on your fuel energy bill that you pay. We eventually passed, after 5 years of struggles, which I talked about in this room, the emergency ambulance fee. You know, it's in effect, y'all. I don't know if you know that. Starting January. I don't think the ambulance will stop picking up people, have they? They're still picking people up, aren't they? It's in effect. The world hasn't come to an end in Montgomery County, just like it didn't come to an end in the rest of these communities. That's $18 million. But believe it or not, it's not $18 million out of $4.6 or $4.7 billion budget, because as Jennifer just explained to you, you walk in to start with that a good portion of the budget is already dedicated. Based on maintenance of efforts and everything else, you're looking at probably almost 80% of the budget is already gone. For that $18 million is not part of 4.7, but is a part of the remaining 20%. So it is a disproportionate impact of the discretionary funding that we were talking about. So how do we get there? We got there by furloughing people, by eliminating all those positions, by reducing the health care benefits of our employees, by changing the pension requirements, by not providing them with COLAs, cost of living adjustments, by not providing them with merit increases. Only last year we gave them just a simple, straight bonus into their pay. Bonus, why? Because I was fearful that if I put it in a COLA, that it would become a permanent charge for which this year I may not be able to afford. So it was a one-time payment. This is how we've been able to maintain this AAA bond rating and place this county in a much more sustainable position. So look at where the money comes from. It comes from property taxes. It comes from income taxes, intergovernmental support, and everything else. But I want you to notice something where the money goes before we leave where the money goes. Part of it is into debt service. Debt service is probably number 4 or 5. And so when people have talked to me about why have you tampered down the CIP budget? In fact, there was an editorial in the Gazette newspaper last week. And it praised me on one hand because of my stewardship in reducing the capital budget. Praise, and we give Leggett praise for his capital budget. But we also have some questions because he didn't spend as much in the capital budget. Now, if they'd gone back historically and looked at that, I think I would have gotten praise on both, because in one period of time, you may recall, I significantly increased the capital budget. Now, why did I do that? Counterintuitive. One, because of the recession, interest costs was lower. Because of the recession, construction costs was down. And we had a large backup of construction projects for schools and libraries and other things simply waiting there. So I did something that people found somewhat interesting. I said, let's build now. Let's expand now. Let's build these things that are there that we know we're going to build in a few years. Let's build them now where it's cheaper and will cost us less. So on one part, I increased funding, expended in the capital budget. Now that we've done that and we see costs creeping back up, I said, now let's tamper it down. So I've literally done both over a period of time in order to provide that balance. So that's a challenge for us. So you note on the things that we've seen on the board, the AAA bond rating. We are going to fight to maintain that. Despite all of these challenges, all these budget woes, all the things that we've done, where other communities have been losing left and right and so forth, we've been able to maintain it. But because of these things, so I wanted you to see this, because far too often people talk about county employees as though they don't exist, that they're not earning their pay, that they have not been supported. They have been. And they have suffered an awful lot. So we have done a great deal of work with fewer employees who have been making less money, and it allowed us to achieve where we are today. Now, what are the challenges going forward for the upcoming budget? One, having not provided COLAs, merit increases for 3 or 4 years, it's very difficult now that you have not or you cannot respond, because you would really negatively impact morale. And so we have to respond to our wage demands in some form or fashion going forward this year. The second problem is we still have a lot of pent-up demands of things that we needed to do. To maintain a top-rate library, to ensure that we respond to some of the other challenges of those in most need in Montgomery County. And then finally, the big word, which is a T word, not taxes, but transportation. It's a real problem, a real problem. Now, I stood before groups like this, and maybe this group 7 years ago when I was running for this office, and I said, we need to increase the gasoline tax in Maryland in order to generate revenues, because I saw that the Transportation Trust Fund was going down. I saw that if we did not do so, it would negatively impact our ability to grow and to prosper in terms of the growth prospects, and we'll be challenged as a result of that. That if we didn't do it then, that the transportation projects that we needed would be costly, would cost us more. Everything from ride-on buses across the line, everything else. I said all of that 7 years ago. And guess what? The Transportation Trust Fund is going down. It cost us more to do it. And I was right about all of that. But at the time when I said, people said, oh, you got to be kidding. You're running for office, and you're saying we need to increase taxes? You're going to lose the election? How could you say that? What kind of logic is that? Well, just telling the truth. We need it then, and we need it now. And we need it now even more so, because now we're talking about what happens with the Purple Line, the Carter City Transit, what happened with Bus Rapid Transit, what happens to all these other major transportation products we have, what will happen with the Carter City Transit now that we need it in order to ensure that the projects that we have on board right now go forward, because we can't go to the second or third stage of those projects unless we resolve the transportation challenges. And so I've spent a lot of time in Annapolis trying to push forward some ideas and suggestions that would give us some relief. And on top of all of that, we've had challenges with our bus fleet. You know, I decided this past year to just take all of those Champion buses off the street. You know, they were catching fire. We had all kinds of problems with them. And I said, well, we're not going to take any more chances. We're just going to take them all off. So we had to scramble. So we had to buy buses to replace them a little bit sooner than anticipated. All of those things happened. In addition to what is happening at the national level, the state level, the changes that Jennifer talked about, and one that has hit us probably more so than people had anticipated, beyond all of those physical challenges, weather-related stuff. And we've had snow-begotten, ice storms, windstorms, we had firestorms, derechos, we even had an earthquake. All of those things hit us. So every time you see it snow, or every time you see the ice out there, when you see those little white flakes falling, you see falling out of the sky, I see dollar signs just falling, it's coming down. Because we have to prepare for that. And my motto is that we're going to move the snow in Montgomery County. We will move the snow. And if you look at county roads, and look at our operation, we have done, in my opinion, an outstanding job on county roads. I underline that, county roads in removing snow. We go through rehearsals every year. We have a snow summit. If you come to our snow war room and you look at the facilities there, you think that you're in Star Wars or something. All of the computers and the television screens can tell you virtually everything. We bring the contractors in to practice rounds about how to get snow off the street. We get equipment in. We get people signed up early in order to remove snow. Now, most of the telephone calls that I get about snow, believe it or not, are not about county roads. Because the average citizen out there doesn't know the difference between a county road, a state road, or a municipal road. They call me about any road. It's 270. I'm calling the county executive. But if you look at county roads, I think we do a wonderful job on snow. So with that, I'm going to stop, respond to any questions you have, or if it's nothing more, just a comment or something that I should consider. This is your opportunity to do so. Just raise your hand, and we'll try to get to as much as possible. And so she'll start in the back there.
In the back, right here. I'm Liz Hoffmeister from here in Bethesda, and I'm a member of Action in Montgomery. And we at Action in Montgomery do appreciate your interest and prioritization of affordable housing. As you know, that has been a priority of ours for a long time. And Action in Montgomery and the Commission on Aging met with you in December, and we asked you about your plans for funding the Housing Initiative Fund this year for 2014. And we had proposed to you that this needed to be increased to $55 million going forward to 2014. And can you give us some sense of what you may do with that this year? Also, we also were hoping that you could talk to the county council about reinstating the way the initiative fund was funded earlier by a 2.5% part of property tax, as it had been in 2008.
Right.
And is that something that you would support?
I think what I stated at the time is my intent to try to increase the fund, and it's still my goal, but I cannot spell out precisely the amount and how we would do that. I think that we've been able to utilize that fund quite creatively over the last few years, and it's a real source of strength for us. And so my objective is to increase it, but I don't want to specify a precise amount because I still must balance all of those other things that I've just described. But it's part of the mix and part of the consideration that we're going through.
Dana Beyer, Senior Advisor to former Council Member Trachtenberg. When I worked for Dutchie, I used to field many questions from parents of children with mental illness. Since the Sandy Hook massacre, there's been a national discussion about mental illness and dealing with it. We know that beginning under the Duncan administration and under Superintendent Wiest, we've been reducing services to children with mental illness in particular. There is money now, hundreds of thousands of dollars, I hear, in HHS that could be used for behavioral health and that I believe Ray Crowell would love to see. Do you have any plans on shifting some of those dollars for mental health care?
Well, I'm not sure that that amount is accurate, but we will be looking into how we can enhance that in a number of ways. I think we made a mistake in years past in when we deinstitutionalized people, which was appropriate, I think, in many cases, but we did not provide the supportive services once they were deinstitutionalized. And we have failed down, not just Montgomery County, but really most of the places around the nation. We will be looking at ways in which we can enhance mental health services. I've had an opportunity to talk to some of the mental health advocates. Most recently, I talked to Mrs. Trachtenberg, who laid out some ideas and suggestions that we are considering to look at that. Thank you.
John Honig, Commission on Aging. I believe you've heard our senior agenda. I'm not going to go through all that, but there's one item I'd like to emphasize. The seniors are very important to have the senior centers open to them. It's the only thing that they have to get away from isolation and to treat other people. One of the problems is that the staffing for upkeep and maintenance has gone down considerably. And some of our managers are involved in upkeep keep and that they don't really get to do their own things. Now, the other side of the coin is that if you fence 83% of the budget as you're doing, the rest of the 17% don't give you very much to play with. But if you can consider some additional help to the senior centers, I think it would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Schmall. I'm chair of the Library Advisory Committee at Chevy Chase Library. First of all, and this is a comment, not a question, I want to thank you and thank the County Council for the increase in the library budget last year of almost $3 million. But I want to remind you, I'm sure you're totally aware, that the library budget still is $9 million below what it was in fiscal '08. You pointed out that fiscal '08 may not be a good comparison because it was probably too rich a budget for the county. But the gap is still very considerable. The number of staff has declined also by about, although it increased just slightly this last year because of the budget increase, it's still about a quarter below what it was in '08. Libraries still matter, and please help us to build the budget back up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you're right, the libraries did take a significant hit. And there are a number of things we need to do to improve that. Yes.
Ready?
Yes.
I am Ed. I still love the Big Apple Gitterman, currently residing in Bethesda. Two things, and I'll try to be as quick as I can. First up, as a transit-dependent person for 5 decades, I did drop my support for the Purple Line a few years ago, but I don't want to get into why right now. But more important, and I think you may have hit on it earlier, I think transportation funding is a problem for Baltimore City and all Maryland counties, and not just yours. Now, in the early 90s, Florida did pass legislation to allow individual counties, by government vote, to raise up to 6 cents a gallon their gas tax to fund capital improvements to roads and mass transit. And I think they did allow for operating improvements on the transit side. In Palm Beach County, where I previously lived, the county commission did approve the full 6 cents a gallon of the local option tax and agreed to a 50-50 funding split between road and mass transit improvements. My 3-part question for Doug Duncan, excuse me, that's Ike Leggett, is A, do you think a local option tax similar to Florida would work in Maryland? B, would a 50-50 funding split similar to Palm Beach County work in Montgomery? And C, can said tax be trust funded for transportation-only project in each county and Baltimore City? And maybe later on I'll tell you what Broward County, Florida tried to do with the gas tax years ago. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, first of all, Doug Duncan may want to come back and answer that question for you, from what I hear.
I'll take your answer.
Let me start off by just giving you my philosophy about this. The transit challenges, in my opinion, are state challenges. I do believe that there is some local role to be played, but I don't want to lead with my chin by simply saying that Montgomery County will assume a disproportionate share of what I consider to be a state challenge. And this is the hub of the challenges we see in terms of the gasoline tax, because probably, as in many jurisdictions, there is a disconnect between, say, the urban cores and the rural portions of the state. For example, if you look at Baltimore region, the Washington region of the state, we are much more dependent on transit, and therefore we have a great investment in transit. But if you look at the rest of the state, they are not as reliant on transit the way we have. And so when you talk about gasoline tax and the local and state share, a person in Western Maryland who looks at that and believes that a disproportionate amount goes to transit is not likely to be supportive of it. And so it's a disconnect that we have to figure a way in which to work through that, at least by perception. My view is that by providing transit and having the local options and having us provide some aspects of that, but having the state recognize that responsibility, it really helps the entire state of Maryland, because we are, in fact, the economic engine of the state of Maryland. And to the degree that we are providing jobs, to the degree that we are growing and enhancing the tax base, you pay taxes, sales taxes, part of the property taxes go to the state of Maryland. So we are benefiting people in the rural communities by way of the transit that we have here. But that's a very hard argument to make to people who really are reluctant to want to pay it. I believe that we should have a share, but I don't think, based on some of the numbers that I've seen, for example, in order to get 10 cent, an increase of the gasoline, 10 cents a gallon, would get you only $300 million in statewide revenue, 10 cents. The commission that they formed a few years ago stated that we needed about $820 million at a minimum for us to go forward, to make this, the program solid. So if 10 cents only gets you $300 million, look at the projects that we have here in Montgomery County. The Purple Line, all the funding, that's $2 billion. Obviously, you would bond finance some of that, and you hope to get something from the federal government. The Carter City Transit, anywhere from $500 million to $1.5 billion, depending on what aspects you look at. If you did the entire bus rapid transit, which I don't recommend that we approach and do at this point in time, that's $2 billion. If you did many of the other projects that are important to the county, you could run up to probably $6, $7, $8 billion. The state is talking about maybe $300 million. And that's 10 cents. And that's all that would get you. And so I'm not sure that the plans that I've seen thus far are sufficient for all of the communities around the state to fulfill the transit and transportation needs. The Baltimore Red Line, the Carter City Transit, the Purple Line between Montgomery and Prince George's County, all those alone will just by way far, far exceed anything remotely close to what we want. But there is a local road, but I just don't want to go out front when I think right now it's a state obligation, because guess what? If the rest of the state looks at it, they say, yeah, let Montgomery County go and pay for its own roads. Let them tax themselves into oblivion if they want to. I'm not about to suggest we do that.
Hi, Mr. Leggett, Nancy Wallace from Bethesda. Instead of a question, I'll just be straightforward.
Sure.
Comments. And I'm here really with the Green Party and to put forward the idea and ask for you to be, you and your staff to be willing to work with us, listen to us about a concept called the Green New Deal, which is articulated at jillstein.org. It was articulated during the presidential campaign last year. And it really takes a look at the foundations of our economy, and the concept of growth, for instance, is not sustainable. So we're coming at it from a really different point of view, and we would look for savings in the budget based on sustainability, steady state. There's a website called steadystate.org that talks about these principles. Increasing quality of life comes more from productivity increases. It comes from quality of life, from mental health, from education. And there's some wonderful indicators. And one of the first things we need to do is change our economic indicators for the county to things similar to the UN Development Index, to the Sustainability Index, for instance, in Seattle. And the four principles are an economic bill of rights, with full employment, and using that as a key factor instead of GNP. The green transition to energy, this county going from 25% wind, congratulations. I wonder how many people in the room know that we can all switch now locally, easily to 100% wind for our own houses. Third, real financial reform, dealing only with local banks and financial institutions, and not dealing with the large Wall Street financial institutions, and functioning democracy, which would not particularly be relevant tonight except for the issue of corporate funding. We need to eliminate the hidden tax breaks. We've given huge subsidies to large corporations in Montgomery County. They're a continuing drain. And we have corporations such as Lockheed Martin that are not paying their full share. We need to look at that, and in general, we need to shift the paradigm to long-term sustainability talk about the weather-related events, that's carbon
Yeah.
dioxide,
Yeah.
that's nitrous oxide,
Yeah.
that's methane. There's so many things that we can do, and that needs to be the priority, is preserving and restoring, not just preserving, because we're way past the point of damage. We're paying hundreds of millions of dollars personally to compensate for these weather issues. And that needs to be the main charge of our economy. And yes, there's going to be belt tightening and lots of change is always difficult. But we really know deep down that the current economic model, the paradigms, the philosophies, the economic theory that we've been using really for 200 years, 240 years in this country is not sustainable. So we would ask for and I know that's difficult and perhaps incomprehensible, but there are many, in fact, University of Maryland is one of the major academic centers of steady state economics in the world.
Yeah.
So we have resources, and we'd like to have that discussion and that.
I'll be glad to have that discussion, and I'm open for any level of discussion. But I would just make two comments. That much of what you describe, I think, are difficult for a local jurisdiction or for any individual state. It needs to be a national discussion which we would have. And then secondly, as it relates to the interconnectivity between the counties and the business interests, one of the things that I'm always puzzled by is that people fail to see the interconnectivity between the movement of businesses. That unless you have a plan, a level playing field across the board for everyone, businesses are interchangeable and movable. There are very few businesses in Montgomery County within a year that could not pick up and move. And sometimes it's nothing more than computers, a headquarters, and the time the lease runs out. And the reason I say that, because you're not dealing with businesses that are tied to a locality because of manufacturing. You can't rebuild the plant. We don't have plants. And so that's one piece that I would hope people will look at, that you have to do this comprehensive across the board, because a business that is here today, unless we all have the same playing field, they could be in Virginia, South Carolina, and North Carolina tomorrow. And therefore, the companies and the communities that are doing all of the sustainable things, doing precisely what you want to happen, will suffer immensely unless everybody's on a similar playing field across the board. Those are just the two pieces, but I'll be glad to have the conversation.
I'm Steve Lodge from Bethesda, and I'm here with Jim Young, also of Bethesda. And we're here on behalf of the Justice and Advocacy Council of Montgomery County, which is a part of the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. And we wanted to, first of all, thank you for the great job that you have been doing in these tough economic times to protect the safety net and the funding for the poor and the vulnerable, as Council Member Berliner said, being a good steward of our county resources. And so we asked that as you're putting together the budgets, as the economy is slowly beginning to improve, to please keep these people, the poor and the vulnerable, uppermost in your mind, and ask what your outlook is on the funding for the safety net as you put together the budget.
Thank you. Well, two things. Certainly, when we look at the budget, and my philosophy has been to do the following in terms of priorities. A, the maintenance of public safety, the school system that we have, protection for the most vulnerable within our community, and expanding opportunities for growth in the county. That's been the driving force that has led most of the discussion related to the budget. I will say this, though. The more we're able to get people back to work and sustain our economy, increase our tax base, the greater the revenues increases that we have. For example, our recent taxes, income tax distribution came in, and I think we were about $3 or $4 million over projection, because the economy has gotten stronger. And so you can't disconnect those things without making some investment and some improvement in those, because it helps us to do much of what we want. The other part of it is is that the county government cannot do it alone. And this is why we rely upon the huge array of our nonprofit agencies around the county that are able to leverage grants and support that we provide them to go out and do much in the county. So with that network that we have, we've last year maintained and hopefully be able to increase and support many of the agencies that go out and do a lot of what you're doing in addition to what the county is doing itself.
Elia Hopkins from Bethesda, and I'd like to talk or ask you a question and encourage your support of the intersection between public safety and our schools, specifically with the School Resource Officer Program. The high school here in Bethesda, BCC High School, is now undergoing a feasibility study to have 2,400 students on a 16-acre plot of land. That's a lot of students that are all teenagers and going into town for lunch and all that sort of stuff. That school resource officer is also responsible for 5 other schools, 10,000 students. So it would be great to see that program be able to come back to a full funding where there was at least one school resource officer per high school as the school system continues to expand and as these students continue to engage in the community, and they need positive role models and ways to see the police and public safety as allies and people and members of their community. So I would just encourage you to consider returning that to full funding.
Well, I'm not sure we'll be able to return it all in 1 year. We will look at in the budget how we can increase this year. One of the things that I did in the last year's budget is that we increase the level of police service. And what you see on one of the charts here, this year's budget, 37.7 in public safety. Part of that was to increase the start of a 3-year program to increase the police officers by about 40 per year for the next 3 years, so we'll have an increase this year. I'm working now with the chief of police so that we can see part of that go into the program that you just described. And we'll have another round again next year, so over a 3-year period, we anticipate about 130 additional officers on the force. That will give us more flexibility to address many of the schools that you've just described. This chart is important. I like to refer to that because it tells you what that increase we had this year. If you notice the budget, there was a slight increase this year. A good part of that increase, you see the $60 million up there, that's for our retiree health plan and the trust. That's a hard number and a difficult decision to put the amounts of money that you see there. What happened years ago was that the rating agencies and others looked at many of the jurisdictions around the country and many private businesses to say, you're not putting enough money aside for retiree health. And retiree health was just skyrocketing. And most jurisdictions did not have sufficient funds to respond to that. And so we've developed a plan over a number of years to restore that, to bring it back up to solvency. Now, in many jurisdictions, county executives, mayors, and governors and others have ignored that. Despite the warnings, have simply ignored it. Because that's a tough decision to make. That $60 million is a tough decision to make. This is money that is going into a fund that is not broke today. It will be broke 8, 10 years from now. You know, most governors, county executives look at it and say, well, that's beyond my term. So why should I fund that? Just walk away from that. Just slide that by. So that's one of the tough decisions I was talking about in terms of the right thing to do. If you're going to be a AAA bond-rated county, you're going to be sufficient. You can't just simply slide that kind of stuff under the rug and then it balloons in a few years from now on the retirees and people who cannot afford it or some future county executive. You need to deal with this stuff now. And so we decided to put money, $60 million in there. And the problem with that and why many people around the country don't do it, the problem is down the line a few years, you get no credit for it. No one knew that we were doing this. No one. I could take that $60 million and I go and build a recreation center, a fire station, and I'm out in front of the station cutting a ribbon. You don't cut a ribbon on this. This is just hard decisions that you make because it's the right thing to do. I don't get another champion bus for it. No recreation center, no school, well, it couldn't buy a school, basically pay for it, but you get my point. You don't get credit for that. So that's part of the increase that we see. And the other part here is for public safety. Because I heard many of you around this table and in this room in the past say, well, you know, we're worried about public safety. We want to see the SRO officers come back. We want to see more police out on the street. Well, I'm responding to that based on these conversations that we've had over the years and these kinds of discussions. And the last part of that is for compensation and challenges that we've had. And I even, when doing that, it was one-time contribution, not an ongoing COLA that goes into the base. So these are very strategic decisions that we made, even for the increases, to pay for retiree health, respond to your challenges and the county's challenges about public safety, and to provide some level of relief for our employees, but in a one-time direct payment. That's a tough decision to make on that. And very few county executives or mayors or governors are actually doing that. But it's the right thing to do for our county and for our people for the long term. Next question.
Aileen Klein, Rockville, Maryland. First off, I wanted to thank you so much for adding some money back into the library's budget last year. A lot of it was used to extend hours to make the libraries open longer, which everybody appreciated. However, there are still two areas that greatly need improvement. One is the collections, which the libraries are changing. People are reading books in different ways. A lot of them are using e-books. And don't know whether you know this or not.
Those e-books are so expensive.
They are as expensive, if not more, than a regular hard copy book.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of stipulations on them from the publishers that, you know, we can only lend them out, I think it's 26 times. Then you have to buy another one. And people don't see that, and they don't know that that's where the money goes. But we need a lot more money in the budget for collections. The second thing we need doesn't come out of the library budget. It's going to have to come out of your GSA facilities budget. And that is, there's a huge problem with cleaning in the library. Everyone uses the computers with their hands and everything. Those computers need to be cleaned. The children crawl all over the floor in the children's area, and those carpets need to be vacuumed daily. The tables need to be cleaned. The children's little hands get all over them. We definitely need more money for cleaning from the facilities budget, if you don't mind.
All right. But for me, the facilities budget is part of the overall budget I have.
GSA,
so,
right.
Yes, right. But the GSA people are here, and they wave your hand.
Please.
Yeah, two of them right there.
Please.
Yeah. I would hope that that the librarians around the country could work out a better arrangement with the publishers of these e-books, because this is an unbelievable ripoff, and I just think we have to find a cheaper way in which to get those e-books, because that is very costly, because you could see the increased cost on that, because more and more people are adopting to that, and we're trying to accommodate those, and so we need to find ways to better accommodate that.
My name is Elise Brown-Hughes. I'm from Bethesda, and I actually represent the PTAs in the Whitman cluster of schools. I just wanted to urge you to support the superintendent's recommended budget for the school system for fiscal year 2014. I think it's a very fiscally conservative budget. It goes a whopping $60 per student above the state required maintenance of effort, which will go a long way for a lot of students. Some of the things that I could highlight for you that I see coming that are new in the superintendent's budget are, he's putting a big focus on professional development. There's a new curriculum in the school system. Without professional development, teachers don't have the tools that they need to be able to present that new curriculum that's required by the state to give to these kids. And the other thing that we see within our cluster of schools is it allows 11 teachers to be hired at small elementary schools that had to cut various specialist kinds of positions, such as guidance counselors, librarians, known as media specialists, reading specialists. Small schools, because of some enrollment formulas, had to make decisions about no longer having a guidance counselor or no longer having a media assistant, or cutting those positions in half, which is what one of the schools in our cluster did. So at this school, the library is not open all day for the kids. They don't have a guidance counselor in the school every day. If those kids have a problem, there's not a guidance counselor there for them. So again, I think the budget is a fiscally conservative one, and I hope that you will be able to support it.
Well, I haven't taken a position about the school system budget. I will say it's going to be a real challenge to go above maintenance of effort, but I have not made a decision about it because I want the school system to have the opportunity to present its budget to me and so we can have a discussion about it. I want the opportunity to look at what additional state aid and support we may have that may go into the system, what our revenues may be like once we get to a final tabulation of that, what our labor negotiations may in fact be like as a result of that. So I think it would be premature for me to say that I'm not going above maintenance of effort or that I will go below that. But I would have to consider all, at least meet the maintenance of effort level. But I have to consider all of those factors. Now, you can see to some degree the potential tension and conflict here because to the degree that you go above the maintenance of effort level, it reduces potentially resources in other areas. But that's the decision that I'd have to balance based on the factors that I see on the ground at the time that I make the decision. But thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Jean Schlesinger, also from Bethesda, and I want to thank you, as many people have, not just for looking out for one community or another, but looking out for really our entire community through really tough times. But I do want to speak tonight as a parent of 3 children in our wonderful schools and tag on to some of the comments that Elise just made. And I have, as a parent, had the pleasure of being involved in the budget at the county level and also advocating for money at the state level for our schools. And I know that, there have been cuts everywhere. And we know that in our schools, I think the county funding has gone down about $1,500 per student during these tough times. Now, during the same period of time, we've gotten about $500 more, I think, from the state per student. So that's a net deficit per student of about $1,000. And as Lise said, those numbers are, I believe, just about right. The superintendent's budget is asking for $60 more per student, if you look at that way, in the current budget. And the cuts that we've seen across the county, the positions that have been cut, they've been everywhere. They've been in our libraries. They've impacted the elderly, and they have, without question, impacted our students. And I think both for the students, generally in the general population, for our ESOL students, for the students who are in poverty, which is now about 33% of our county, it's worth $60 more per student if there's a way, to make it happen. We know you have tough choices to make, and we appreciate your support of the schools.
Right, thank you. I have been very supportive of the schools and supported them almost 100% of their request, and I believe very strongly in what we've done in education. Much of what you've just said to me, my daughter says to me repeatedly. She's a very active PTA member, and we got I have 2 grandkids in the school system, and I think it was a year ago. One of them was in one of the what we call the learning cottages, the trailers. Yeah, the affordables. Yeah. Well, we call them the learning cottages. And she said to me, "Aren't you county executive? My father's county executive here. My grandkids in this learning cottages that you call it." So I've heard it all, and so she was reminding me. So I'm very much aware of the challenges that you've just stated, and the wonderful job that our school system has done, and the cuts that they've absorbed as well. Okay, any other questions before we close? Let me again thank Ken Hartman, who is the Regional Service Director here. Thank you, Ken. And all the board members of the advisory board here, thank you so very much for coming out. We hope to get through all of this and to have a budget presented by March the 15th. If you dislike the budget, blame OMB. If you like it, make sure you contact me when it comes out. Thank you very much for coming out.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him opening his own clothing store at the age of 18? 1 in 138,000. Excited to be a part of pop culture, he packed for the big city. The odds of finding someone to invest in his vision? 1 in 4.5 million. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 88. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference.
The number one thing you can do to prevent catching and spreading the flu is to wash your hands. Use soap and warm water to work up a good lather. Make sure you wash your hands for at least 20 seconds, or as long as it takes to sing the ABCs twice. Also be mindful of hygiene in your workspace. Health officials suggest using hand sanitizer. Wiping down surfaces like your phone and keyboard with antibacterial cleaner like this.
If you are a recent high school graduate or even a career-changing adult, get your start with us. Montgomery College offers more than 130 programs of study and classes to fit your busy schedule. Apply today. Montgomery College, endless possibilities. 240-567-5000.
Before introducing our speakers, I want to note that as a former rider on the K6 bus line, the regular bus that runs the same route as the K9, I can tell you from personal experience how important this approved service is. The K6 is one of the busiest routes in Maryland and recently has been averaging close to 6,000 weekday riders. These riders will now have more options for a faster trip, and overall service in this corridor on either the K6 or the new K9 should be less crowded and more reliable. In addition to the benefits to our riders, this improved bus service should also help traffic congestion on the very busy New Hampshire Avenue corridor and increase ridership on Metro. So this new bus service is a win for our riders, a win for those who drive on New Hampshire Avenue, and a win for Metro.
One of the highest priorities, of course, is to improve transportation throughout our network and provide more alternatives to reduce traffic congestion. That's why I'm so glad to be here today to help celebrate the new K9 Metro bus service. It will make a big difference in the New Hampshire Avenue corridor. Metro bus priority corridor service is critical to helping meet our region's transportation needs. We look forward to working with Metro on developing more premium corridor sites along the way. This new New Hampshire Avenue corridor is one of the highest ridership routes in Maryland, with more than 5,800 weekday riders and 5,300 Saturday riders and 3,400 Sunday riders. That's an amazing number. It is also a truly regional route, covering the District of Columbia, Prince George's, and Montgomery counties. The new K9 bus priority corridor is the first step toward implementing the New Hampshire Avenue Rapid Transit Corridor System. This rapid transit corridor system has the potential to double the ridership and significantly reduce transit travel times. Those using the K9 route should see immediate improvements, such as new buses, more bus service, reduced crowding, a faster ride with limited stops, and better reliability. In the future, this route will connect the Purple Line at the new Tacoma-Langler Transit Center at the University and New Hampshire Avenue intersection. We will work closely with Ramada and the Maryland Department of Transportation to fund the second phase of the K9 service, which will extend the route to the Food and Drug Administration in White Oak. I want to thank all of you for coming out today and to wish you a happy new year. This is an exciting time for Maryland, the District of Columbia, and of course, for all of those who will look at this ridership as a way to improve time, convenience, and quality of life. Thank you very much.
I'm really excited to be here and excited to be here with my colleagues from throughout the region and County Executive Leggett. We're always delighted to have you. And I know how excited you must be about this better bus connection that's going to serve parts of Montgomery County. I'm going to go through the city of Tacoma Park and, of course, terminate here in the District of Columbia. This happens to be my Metro bus station, and I can walk here. I usually take an e-bus here or our bus here, but what we know for sure is that bus service, if we are to keep up with growing jobs, if we're to keep up with a growing population, we have to also make sure that our bus system keeps up as well. So this K-9, and we have experience with these bus services throughout our region with limited stops, that riders regularly flock to those stops. The businesses along the route say, can I get a stop? Because that really means that people are coming towards their business and towards those stops. And it really means that we're serving our customers better. So our customers know that we're growing, they know that we're making investments, they know that we've made the system safer, and that they know that we're making it more reliable. And this is just another example. So I can't wait to cut the ribbon.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the future of transit. That's why this is so exciting. The days of the old bus stopping every couple seconds and sitting in traffic, we are going past that now. We are talking about express buses. We are talking about regional service. We are talking about WMATA, Montgomery County, and the District of Columbia working together to create a better transit future for our residents. And it is in that kind of investment that the future of our region actually depends upon. So I am just so grateful to be here, so pleased to see this initiative, so pleased that it is laying the groundwork for what the county executive described as our own rapid transit network that we hope to have in Montgomery County that is so critical to our future. But ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake about it, this is the future of transit, and that's why we are here to celebrate it.
The project to accelerate the time that it takes to get in this corridor on bus is one of the most important transportation priorities in this part of the region. And I'm really excited to see Metro moving forward in this area, and I'm glad that the county government is supporting it, and I look forward to continuing to enhance this service area in the coming years. I think we've got a lot of work to do here, and we're really beginning to make some fast progress.
I'm very pleased to be here with County Executive Ike Leggett, members of the Montgomery Council, as well as members of the Washington Metro Board. I appreciate the support that they give to Washington Metro, and especially in Montgomery County. We're pleased to be launching the K-9 service this past week. It brings limited stop service to residents of Maryland. It started on December 31st. We completed a study of the K6 service and saw, as everyone knew that rode it, that it was very overcrowded and really needed help. And the best way to provide that, because it served about 5,800 customers a day, was to introduce this limited stop K9 service. We listened to our customers, and we think we're bringing to them what they've asked for. It'll be a faster trip, a more reliable trip, going from the Northwest Park in Montgomery County down here to the Fort Totten Metro Rail Station. Improves connectivity for our folks. There's less crowding on the buses. There'll be better schedule adherence. And there's up-to-date, easy-to-read schedules, as you'll notice at the bus stop signs. We've been putting up new bus stop signs, new flags, new poles along the route. And we're working with the local jurisdictions to create dedicated transit lanes, implement transit signal priority and signal timing adjustments, and improve key intersections to speed the flow of buses along New Hampshire Avenue. Thank you for joining us all here today, and let's cut the ribbon.
Thank you. We're going to create a ribbon?
Have a ribbon?
Count of three.
Without a ribbon.
One, 2.
Oh.